"You eat too slow," she said, and the plate shattered on tile. I'm Helen Reeves, 53, a retired nurse, mother to Emily, married to Mark. It was 7 on Sunday evening, and I'd cooked a roast the way my mother taught me. The tablecloth was clean, the good plates out, the kind of small effort that says we still try. The crack of ceramic on the floor rang through the room, sharp as a door slam, and for a second, nobody breathed. I watched sauce spray the skirting board like it had committed a crime. Emily didn't look at me. She scraped what was left of my portion into the trash and dropped the plate in with it. "You take forever," she said. "We're done waiting." Mark's chair creaked, then steadied. He stared at the salt shaker like it had offered him a way out. My throat worked around a reply that didn't come. I lifted my water and made myself swallow. If I let this stand, I'd lose my place in my own home. "Emily," I said, careful with each word, "put the plate back." She rolled her eyes. "It's already filthy." The roast cooled between us. I reached for the serving fork and felt the steady tremor I hate. I made myself stop it by pressing my hand to the table. Something inside me tightened, a small knot I'd ignored for years. I would not be quiet. I stacked the remaining dishes and stood to carry them to the sink. The kitchen window held a rectangle of evening, and I could see our fence, the neighbor's maple, the line where last summer's paint job had missed a corner. My foot found a shard that had skated under the chair. I picked it up and washed it. Grease clung to the rim. I could feel the tiny chips where it had fractured. I set it on the counter, fragment of a moment I did not want to forget. Mark cleared his throat. "Let's not make a thing," he said. 3 seconds later, he pushed back from the table and took his plate to the sink too, as if that added weight to neutrality. The room didn't warm. I kept my eyes on the water running bright and constant. I waited for him to touch my shoulder. He didn't. A text buzzed. "Sam from next door. Heard something break. You okay?" I typed back, "Fine," dropped a plate. It felt like lying to a doctor, the kind of lie that keeps an infection under the skin. I dried my hands and turned off the tap. "Dinner's over," Emily announced, already halfway down the hall. The hallway light cut across her face, and then she was gone. I sat. The chair felt wrong, like it belonged to someone else. When I finally spoke, my voice surprised me. "This is my house," I said. Mark turned the salt shaker again. "Let's keep the peace," he said. I pushed my chair in. "Peace isn't the point," I said. The knot in my chest pulled tighter. I thought about the years I'd spent easing strangers through fear at the hospital, the calm voice I used to lend, the steady hands. I still had them. I just hadn't used them here. "I'm changing a few things," I said. Emily's footsteps paused in the hall. "Like what?" I stood and folded the tablecloth, careful and slow. "Like how we speak to each other, like who touches my things, like who decides when I'm finished eating." Small, simple lines, but they made a fence I could see. She came back to the doorway, arms crossed. "You're too sensitive," she said. I met her eyes and held them. "Maybe," I said, "but I'm not invisible." Her mouth lifted at one side, the look she gives when she's sure she has the last word. I rinsed my glass. The fragment on the counter caught the light. I dried it and slipped it into the drawer where we keep the can opener and the spare batteries. People save receipts for a reason. I needed a reason too. I would need proof of what this night felt like when I started forgetting the edges of it. I would not have to remember alone. I carried the roast to the fridge and wrapped it. I labeled the container with a strip of tape and a date I didn't say out loud. I wiped the counter. I wiped the floor. I put the broom away. Then I walked back to the table and stood with my palms open on the wood, the way I've stood beside hospital beds when there was nothing left to do but stand. Emily lingered, waiting for me to fold. I didn't. I looked at the chair where I always sit, and then at my hands. "If I'm not welcome, say so," I said. She smirked. "Next time," she said, "she'd serve me nothing." "No one likes a complainer, Mom." The words landed sharper than she meant them to, but she didn't take them back. Morning light spilled over the kitchen counter, the coffee still steaming in my favorite mug. I let her voice echo a moment before answering. "I wasn't complaining," I said. "Just talking." She'd already left the room, her phone in hand. The silence that followed felt practiced, like a punishment delivered by routine. At the office, the air felt colder than usual, the kind of chill that makes you keep your cardigan on no matter how warm it looks outside. I'd come back part-time, filing reports, managing records, safe, familiar things. The place hadn't changed, only the faces had. Younger staff moved faster, laughed louder. My desk sat near the clock, ticking a steady rhythm that made me feel both anchored and erased. When I asked for a few extra hours, my manager smiled too quickly. "We'll see," he said. The next day, an email arrived from Human Resources, a reminder about professional tone. It wasn't even addressed to me. It had been forwarded to the wrong Helen, but I read every word anyway. I folded the printed memo, the paper warm from the printer, and tucked it into my purse. I wasn't sure why I kept it. Proof, maybe, that I still cared about how I was spoken to. At lunch, I called home. No answer. By the third ring, I gave up. Emily would be working, I told myself, or avoiding. The latter felt closer to truth. Walked to the break room, poured stale coffee, and watched steam blur my reflection in the glass door. That's when I felt it again. The same chill as in that memo. A kind of quiet freeze that spreads without noise or warning. When I got home, the living room looked untouched. No television hum, no sound of dishes, just stillness. My purse strap slipped from my shoulder as I sat down. "Emily?" I called. Her room door stayed shut. I told myself not to push, but I pushed anyway. "You changed the Wi-Fi password again." From behind the door came, "You're welcome." My heart stung from the sarcasm. "I didn't ask for help," I said. Her reply, "You need it." Later that night, I found the banking app logged out. I tried my password twice, then 3 times. Invalid. The message glared from the screen. I felt the air around me cool, as if the apartment itself had joined her side. I sat very still and counted my breaths until the feeling passed. When I went to bed, I made a note on paper. Change accounts. Withdraw access. It looked like a list of groceries, but it was my first defense. The next morning, I arrived at work early. The clock on the wall read 7:15. I'd brought muffins, a peace offering to an office that didn't need me. As I set them down, a younger colleague smiled politely but didn't reach for one. "You didn't have to," she said. I shrugged. "I like sharing." She turned back to her screen. The coffee machine hissed behind me, filling the room with that burnt, bitter smell I'd come to expect. By midday, I could feel the distance closing in from every direction. At work, at home, in the silence between text messages that never came. I wasn't invisible yet, but I was fading in slow motion. That evening, I checked my mail and found a second copy of the HR memo. Same reminder, different signature. A mistake again. Or maybe not. I tore the envelope open and read it standing by the porch light. Employees are reminded that tone impacts team morale. I almost laughed. If only tone was all that mattered. The wind tugged at the paper. I held it tighter, folded it once more, and slipped it into the same pocket as before. Proof of something I couldn't name yet. I went inside and set my coffee mug on the counter, watching the last swirl of heat drift away. In that small act, I decided, I'd start drawing lines. Not for her, not for them, but for myself. She thought she was helping. She called it care. But in my own head, the truth was simpler, colder, and final. She called it helping. I called it theft. "Your balance shows 0, ma'am." The teller's voice was soft, practiced, but her eyes flickered when she saw the screen. I stared at the paper she slid across the counter, black numbers where security should have been. The overhead lights hummed faintly, too bright for what was happening. The printout showed $0 in my personal savings, and the line of ink looked final, like a signature I hadn't given. I swallowed hard. "That can't be right," I said. She turned the screen toward me, her tone professional but kind. It was transferred 3 days ago. Same joint account you share. 3 days. I had been home, cooking, waiting for Emily to come by with groceries. I'd told her I'd handle them next time. She'd smiled and said, "You work too hard for nothing." I hadn't realized how literal she meant it. My hands felt strange holding the paper, like it belonged to someone weaker than I'd ever been. "Can I freeze the account?" I asked. The teller nodded, her voice lowering. "We can issue a temporary block, ma'am. You'll need to sign here." She pointed to the bottom line. The pen felt heavy. Behind me, someone coughed impatiently, and I heard the faint buzz of the clock near the ceiling ticking toward 4:20. As I signed, the door opened, and the afternoon light poured in, thin, harsh, and white. The manager, a young man named Aaron, came over. "Everything all right?" he asked quietly. The teller gave him a small nod, and he gestured toward his office. Inside, the blinds were half closed, slicing the light into stripes across his desk. "We'll file a report," he said, "and I'll help you open a new account, separate access." He paused, watching my face. "Do you want to name anyone else as a beneficiary?" I shook my head. "No one," I said. I left out the reason. I no longer trusted anyone who shared my last name. He nodded. "Good choice." I could tell he wanted to ask more, but he didn't. I respected that restraint. It made me feel briefly like I still had control. On the way home, I stopped at the pharmacy and stood in line just to stand somewhere anonymous. When my turn came, I asked for aspirin I didn't need, just to hear my own voice sound normal. The cashier said, "Will that be debit or credit?" And I froze before answering. Debit felt too exposed. I said, "Cash." I handed over a $10 bill and took the receipt like proof that something still worked. At home, I waited for Emily. The house was dim, curtains drawn against the same light I'd faced at the bank. When she arrived, she tossed her purse onto the couch and opened the fridge. "You changed the PIN," she said. "They called me." I didn't look at her. "It's my money," I said. She laughed, short and sharp. "You won't need it where you're headed." That line didn't sound like a joke. I asked what she meant. She shut the fridge. "You're losing it," she said. "You don't even see what you're doing to yourself." I felt the same cold that lived in the bank teller's polite voice. "You drained $12,600, I said. She turned toward me, smiling as if I'd caught her playing some harmless game. "I'm fixing things," she said, "for both of us." Later that evening, Aaron called to confirm the freeze. "You'll get confirmation by mail within 3 business days, he said. I thanked him. Before hanging up, he hesitated. "If anything feels off, call me directly." It was the kind of offer that sounded simple but meant more than it should. I wrote his number on the back of the statement and folded it twice, slipping it into my handbag. The phone rang again an hour later. Unknown number. I answered, expecting the bank. Instead, a voice I knew said, "Don't embarrass us." The call ended before I could speak. My pulse thudded in my ears. I stood still, phone in hand, as the refrigerator motor clicked on and filled the room with a low hum. It was strange how sound could make fear real. I sat at the table and unfolded the paper again, tracing the empty numbers with my thumb. That balance line, 0, felt like an accusation, not a total. I reached for my handbag, slid the folded report inside, and zipped it shut. Proof. That's what I needed now. Proof and distance. Outside, a car door slammed. Emily's. I didn't move. The house seemed smaller than it had that morning, the air heavier. I made a list on a scrap of mail. New account, legal advice, locks. I added one more word at the bottom, withdrawal, and underlined it twice. Before I went to bed, I checked the window latches. Everything seemed fine, quiet, almost too still. But as I set my handbag by the chair, a faint flash from the street lamp caught the paper edge inside it. I thought of Aaron's calm tone, of Emily's laughter, of what people choose not to see until it's too late. When I finally lay down, I kept one hand near the phone. I didn't sleep much. The next morning, my car key was gone. You must have misplaced it again." She said it from the hallway, bored and certain. I checked the bowl by the door, the dish on the dresser, the coat pocket where I keep spares. Nothing. I could feel the worn leather of my handbag under my palm, the softened grain catching at my skin, steadying me. Keys don't vanish. People move them. "I left it on the hook," I said. "Last night." She shrugged. "You leave things everywhere." I walked the rooms anyway, naming what I touched so I would remember. Hook, drawer, cupboard, the little dish shaped like a leaf. When I circled back, she was scrolling her phone. "I need to get to the pharmacy," I said. "Soon." She didn't answer. At 7:30, I called the non-emergency number and explained it slowly. The operator told me to wait inside. I stood by the window and watched the street settle into its usual routine. The stakes were simple. Without a car, I was stuck under someone else's mercy. 2 officers arrived. One walked through the kitchen while the other asked questions by the door. "Any signs of entry?" he said. "Anyone else have keys?" I told the truth because it seemed like the only ground I still owned. They looked at the locks and window latches. The younger one bent to study the sill and then straightened, writing. "No signs of forced entry," he said, more to his notebook than to me. I wanted to say, "Look at me instead. Look at how fear stands up straight but can't move forward." Instead, I asked if they would log the visit. "It'll be noted," he said. The phrasing felt clinical. Still, it was something. Paper remembers when people won't. Emily drifted into the kitchen and leaned on the counter. "She does this a lot," she said. "Loses things." I met her eyes. I didn't lose it. Her smile was patient in the way of people delivering corrections. "You've been tired," she said. The officer glanced between us, cautious. I saw his pen pause. "Check the car," I said. "Please." He followed me outside. We opened the door and searched under seats and mats. Nothing. The sun sat behind cloud. The driveway offered no answer. He closed his notebook. "File if you'd like," he said. "But without damage, there's not much we can do." I thanked him for coming. When they left, I stood by the fence and counted to 10. The house looked ordinary. Ordinary can hide cruelty better than shadows. Sam called over the fence, asking if everything was all right. I said, "Just a mix-up." He lifted a hand. "I'm around." Inside, I wrote what had been said, word for word, where the officer stood when he looked at the frame. I took out my phone and found the setting I'd never needed. I started recording every conversation in the house. If the world insisted on doubt, I would learn to speak in proof. She noticed. "Paranoid now?" she said. "You're making it worse." I put the phone on the table. "This is for both of us." She stepped closer, voice lower. "You don't get visitors without me here. It's for safety." I felt something close around my life that didn't belong to me. I went to the drawer and held the empty hook like it could answer back. I didn't cry. I was busy. I listed small tasks, tiny repairs, ways to build a ladder out of nothing. A car key is little, but the freedom it buys is not. That night my front door locked from the outside. "Mom, it's better if you rest." Her voice came from the hallway, soft but firm, the tone people use when they've already decided for you. I stood by the table, fingers brushing the edge of the mail. The top envelope smelled faintly of ink and glue. My name, typed neatly. I slid it open, already knowing it wasn't ordinary. Inside was a petition for guardianship. Her name filled the petitioner line, bold and permanent. "Mental decline," it read. "In need of supervision." My chest tightened. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator. Ordinary sounds become cruel when they frame betrayal. I lit the candle on the counter. The wax pooled slow, its faint sweetness clashing with the acid in my throat. "Rest," she'd said. That word had stopped meaning comfort. It now meant silence. I turned the paper over, reading every line twice. I wasn't confused. I wasn't sick. I was being erased. When she came into the kitchen, I didn't look up. "You did this. I said. She leaned on the doorway, her arms folded. "It's not about you," she said. "It's about safety." I laughed once, short. "Whose?" She didn't answer. I saw her eyes dart toward the candle. "You're unstable," she added, softer now, as if the word itself could sedate me. "You should let people help." I folded the petition, careful not to tear it. "You mean control." I could smell the wax turning acrid from the heat. "I'm not signing anything," I said. She shrugged, already finished with the argument. "You don't need to." The door closed behind her. I listened for the lock, imagined it sliding into place. I called the only person I trusted who might understand. An old colleague, Karen, a social worker who'd seen too many families implode. "She filed a guardianship," I said. There was a pause, the kind professionals use to measure danger. "Helen, listen carefully," she said. "You have to respond formally. Don't wait." I heard the clatter of her keyboard. "Hire counsel. I'll email you a list. But whatever you do, don't confront her alone." "I already did," I said. Karen sighed. "Then stop. Everything you say will be twisted into proof. Keep records. Keep your voice steady." I looked at the petition again. Proof. That word had started to sound holy. I went to my room and opened the box under the bed, a small reserve I'd kept separate, cash folded in an envelope marked RAIN, $2,400 exactly. I never told Emily about it. It was supposed to be for emergencies, but I realized this was one. I called a lawyer from the list Karen sent. He sounded efficient, expensive. "Bring the document tomorrow," he said. "We'll file opposition." His tone steadied me more than his words did. When I hung up, I checked my phone. Emily had posted a long message online, photos of me, a caption about caring for aging parents, and hard decisions. The comments filled with sympathy. Strangers told her how brave she was. I scrolled through, heart pounding, until I found one that said, "You're doing the right thing. Protect her." I almost laughed again. "Protect me. From what? From myself?" Karen called back. "Don't answer her posts," she said. "Don't feed it. Stay factual. Truth outlasts noise." That line stuck in my head like a warning. I opened a fresh notebook and wrote it down. Night settled heavy. I blew out the candle and watched the smoke curl upward. The smell lingered in the air, a mix of wax and something burnt. I pressed the folded petition flat against the table. It wasn't just paper. It was intent. A claim to my body, my choices, my life. I whispered to the empty kitchen, "You won't win." The refrigerator clicked off, and for a brief second, the silence felt complete. I tucked the document into my handbag beside the receipt for the lawyer's retainer and the cash envelope. Tomorrow, I'd start taking back the ground she'd stolen under my feet. I glanced at the top of the page again and caught the date printed in neat legal type. The hearing was set for the 14th. "Check Facebook before you call her." Sam's voice carried a mix of warning and pity. I didn't want to, but I opened the app anyway. The screen lit up blue, and there it was, my daughter's post. "Pray for my mom. She's lost. We're doing our best." The comments came in like steady rain, sympathy, advice, judgment. Some from people I hadn't seen in 20 years, now treating my name like a public case file. The light from the phone made my eyes ache, but I couldn't look away. One woman wrote, "Bless you for caring for her." Another, "My aunt was the same before her diagnosis." Diagnosis. That word felt like a knife someone else had sharpened. I scrolled down until the battery warning blinked red. The screen went dark, and for a second I saw my reflection instead. Tired, smaller than I remembered. The stakes were no longer private. It wasn't just my money, my house, my freedom anymore. It was my name. I called Sam. "Did you see it?" he asked. "Everyone has." He didn't sound shocked, only disappointed. "Print it," I said. "All of it." He hesitated. "Are you sure?" I was. "If she wants to make me evidence, I'll meet her there." I heard the printer hum in the background as he promised to drop the pages by later. Proof would be ugly, but it would be mine. By noon, I was sitting at my kitchen table surrounded by those printouts, my life dissected in public text. Photos I hadn't shared in years, a caption from her. She doesn't remember where she puts things anymore. I whispered, "That's not confusion, that's exhaustion." My lawyer called soon after. "We need to address this," he said. "It's defamation, but subtle. We can send a cease letter." I said yes before he finished. "Make it sound calm," I told him. "Not angry, calm gets heard." He emailed me the draft an hour later. I printed it and signed my name slowly, pressing down hard with the pen. Watching my own signature felt like reclaiming something tiny but real. The smell of ink lingered as I folded the paper. "Will it stop her?" I asked. He exhaled. "No, but it starts the trail." That line stuck with me. Starts the trail. The backlash came faster than I expected. By evening, she'd posted again. "When you try to help someone and they turn on you." Hundreds of likes, dozens of comments. Someone wrote, "Keep your chin up, Emily. Some people can't be saved." I shut the phone off, but the glow stayed behind my eyes like a bruise. Sam came over with a folder, photos of every post, every comment, time-stamped and printed. He laid them on the table. "This is your truth, not hers," he said. "But you'll need more than that." I nodded. "I'm tracking everything," I said. "Every dollar, every transfer." Since January, she had withdrawn $21,300 from my accounts under the guise of household maintenance. I could prove it now. The numbers lined up like coordinates leading to a buried mine. Sam flipped through one of the pages. "They think they can rewrite who you are," he said. I could hear the anger he didn't want to show. "They can't," I said, though it sounded more like hope than certainty. "Not forever." That night, I sat by the window and looked at the glow of other homes, ordinary lives continuing without spectacle. I wondered if anyone else inside those walls had been turned into a story against their will. The quiet outside felt both comforting and cruel. My phone buzzed again. I didn't look. I unplugged it and let the battery die. When I went to bed, the cease letter was sealed, stamped, and waiting on the counter. A single sheet of paper that might not silence her, but would mark the first line of defense. I lay awake listening to the faint whir of the fridge, thinking of how reputations could be ruined in a single click, but rebuilt only with time and proof. In the morning, I'd deliver that letter myself. I'd start the slow work of restoring what she'd burned down, one post at a time. I thought I'd seen the worst already, but the next envelope would prove me wrong. Then someone mailed me her lawyer's card. "They want a settlement, Mrs. Reeves." The lawyer across the table said it gently, as if rehearsed. He slid a folder toward me, the paper inside still warm from the copier. $10,000 for peace, he added. The word peace sounded like a sale item, something you could return if it didn't fit. I looked down at the offer, $10,000 in exchange for my home, my history, everything left of me that hadn't already been drained. The air in his office felt wrong. The temperature was too low, sharp against my hands as I flattened the draft. The logo at the top of the page looked smug. "You expect me to sign this?" I asked. He clasped his hands. "It's generous, considering the current dispute." I almost laughed. "Dispute? My daughter forged my signature. That's not a dispute. It's theft." He leaned back. "The bank will see it as a family misunderstanding. Settling privately saves both of you the humiliation." I pushed the paper back across the table. "I've had enough humiliation," I said. His expression didn't change. That calm, professional stillness people learn when they're paid to outlast you. My own attorney, Mr. Lane, sat beside me. He was patient in a way that felt deliberate, his tone never rising. "We're declining," he said, "and filing a counterclaim citing undue influence and document fraud." The other lawyer frowned. "Then prepare for a long fight." When we left the building, the afternoon sun hit hard after hours under those fluorescent lights. Lane handed me a copy of the settlement offer. "Keep this," he said. "We'll need it later." I slipped it into the document folder in my bag, beside every other proof I'd collected: the petition, the bank slips, the printed posts. Together, they felt heavier than paper. "Do you think she knows what she started?" I asked. Lane adjusted his glasses. "She knows," he said. "She just doesn't understand where it leads." That sentence stayed with me. I walked home slower than usual, feeling the cold even through the heat. When I got in, my phone was already ringing. Her name flashed on the screen. I almost didn't answer, but silence had never helped me before. "You're ruining my life," she said before I could speak. Her voice cracked halfway through the word life. I could hear traffic in the background. "I'm trying to fix this before it gets worse." "Worse for who?" I asked. There was a pause, a long one. "You'll regret this," she said. "I already regret trusting you," I replied. She hung up. I sat at the table and opened the folder again. The draft settlement stared up at me like an accusation. I ran my fingers over the surface of the paper. It still held the faint chill from the office air. I thought about how money could twist meaning, how $10,000 could look like mercy to one person and insult to another. Lane called later that evening to confirm the filing date. "We'll submit it first thing Monday," he said. "Expect pushback. They'll try intimidation next." I almost smiled. They already have. After the call, I poured myself water and sat still long enough to hear the refrigerator hum and stop. The quiet felt thick, pressing against my ears. I thought of what Karen, my social worker friend, once told me. Paper can defend you if you treat it like a shield. I took out every document I had and laid them across the table, one after another, in order. Bank records, guardianship notice, screenshots, the draft settlement, each one a bruise turned into evidence. I circled the offer amount, $10,000, in pen, bold and dark, and wrote beneath it, "Declined." It wasn't about the money, it was about the cost of silence. The house seemed colder after that, though the air hadn't changed. I shut off the lights and went to bed with the folder under my arm, the papers inside like a heartbeat, reminding me I still existed in ink and fact, not rumor and control. I woke up near dawn to the sound of the mail slot clattering. A thick envelope lay on the floor, addressed to me in clean, unfamiliar handwriting. I tore it open. The first line stopped me cold. "Notice of property transfer, recorded 6 weeks ago." But the deed was already transferred. How did my name disappear from my own house? I said it aloud in the registry office, the words landing harder than I meant. The clerk looked up, startled but polite. She handed me a folder and gestured toward the records window. The paper inside felt rough, uneven at the edges, like it had been handled too many times. I ran my fingers across the surface, tracing the embossed seal before my eyes even found the signature line. There it was, my name, but not my hand. The ink sat raised above the paper, slightly darker than it should have been. My handwriting looped softly, always consistent. This was tight, mechanical. I said quietly, "That's not mine." The clerk frowned. "It's signed here," she said, tapping the page. "Filed 6 weeks ago." 6 weeks. Around the same time I'd found that envelope about the guardianship. I remembered the cold weight of that letter, and it hit me. She had been preparing this for months. My lawyer, Lane, stood beside me. "Can we verify the witness signatures?" he asked. The clerk turned to her screen. "2 names listed, both notarized." Lane leaned over the counter. "Pull the notary record." She hesitated but complied. After a long pause, she said, "One of the witnesses is your daughter." I didn't speak. The other name was a friend of hers from college. Lane exhaled slowly, then turned to me. "This isn't just manipulation. It's forgery." I nodded, though my stomach twisted. "So what now?" I asked. "We file a fraud report," he said. "Today." His tone left no room for panic, only procedure. The stakes were plain. If we didn't act now, I'd lose the only roof that still carried my name, even if the law said it didn't. The registry hall smelled faintly of paper dust and ink. Every sound echoed, the shuffle of forms, the squeak of chairs. People moved in their quiet, bureaucratic rhythm, unaware that a life was unraveling 3 feet from them. Lane filled out the complaint form line by line, while I signed my statement beneath the forged version of my own name. My hand trembled as I wrote. I wanted to scream, but silence served me better now. He took the copies to the counter and returned with a stamped confirmation. "Fraud case accepted," he said. "You'll get the reference number once the injunction is logged." I watched him file the documents into his leather folder. "We'll freeze the property," he said. "No sale, no transfer, nothing moves until the case resolves." The words didn't sound like victory, but they were close enough to relief. "Do you think she'll fight it?" I asked. Lane looked at me for a moment before answering. "Of course, but the difference now is that you're fighting back." I felt something unclench inside me, a slow, cautious breath of air. He placed his hand flat on the folder before closing it. "The registry acknowledgement makes this official," he said. "They can't ignore you anymore." When we stepped outside, the afternoon sun hit the pavement hard, bright and indifferent. I stood there holding my copy of the title record. The texture of it, coarse, fibrous, felt more real than anything I'd touched in weeks. I folded it carefully, slipped it into the inside pocket of my coat, and looked up. At that moment, I realized how betrayal works. It's not one clean strike, but a series of quiet papers, each signed while you're still trying to believe you're loved. Lane's phone buzzed. He checked the screen and nodded. "Temporary injunction approved," he said. "Effective immediately." The property was officially frozen under the case number. For the first time in months, I wasn't the one being erased. As we walked toward the parking lot, he said, "You're winning this, slowly." I believed him, though the word winning felt strange in my mouth. The road ahead wasn't justice yet, only distance from ruin. That night, I placed the registry copy beside the other proofs on my table, each one a fragment of my story, stacked in careful order. I stared at the forged signature again under the lamp's dull glow. I didn't feel anger, not exactly. It was something quieter, heavier, the kind of resolve that doesn't shout. Then, just as I switched off the light, there was a knock at the door. A courier handed me a thick envelope stamped with the court seal. I tore it open and scanned the first line. Then came the court summons. "All rise." The bailiff's voice echoed through the courtroom, firm and rehearsed. I stood, hands clasped, feeling the weight of every pair of eyes behind me. The courtroom light was merciless, bright, cold, and honest in a way people rarely are. Emily sat at the opposite table, her gaze fixed on the polished wood in front of her. She didn't look up. Her lawyer shuffled papers as if the sound could fill the silence between us. The judge entered, robes whispering against the bench, and everyone sat again. I could smell paper and polish, that faint sterile scent of places where truth gets filtered through procedure. Lane leaned toward me, speaking quietly. "Remember, you're not defending yourself anymore. You're asserting ownership." I nodded. My throat was dry, but the words in my statement were burned into memory. The clerk pressed a button, and a microphone crackled to life. The transcript was being read aloud. "Client exceeded authority in executing property transfer." The words dropped like stones. I heard a collective murmur ripple through the gallery, people adjusting in their seats, a cough, a whispered comment. Even the judge paused before looking at Emily's counsel. "Is that an admission?" she asked. He hesitated, then said, "It's a clarification, Your Honor." The judge's eyebrows lifted. "It sounds like more than that." I stared at my daughter. Her shoulders stiffened, but she didn't turn. I used to know every flicker of her expression. Now she was a stranger wearing her own face. Lane handed me the transcript copy, the line already underlined. "That's your proof," he said. My hands trembled slightly as I held it, the paper warm from the machine, but heavy with something colder. I folded it once, then placed it flat again. When the judge asked if I wished to make a statement, I stood slowly. My knees felt unsteady, but the voice that came out wasn't. "Your Honor," I said, "this didn't start with documents or deeds. It started at a dinner table." The courtroom stilled. She told me I ate too slow. That's how it began. One small humiliation after another, until I believed my own silence was peace. My voice didn't break, though I could feel the edges fray. Today, I'm not silent." The judge nodded once, and I sat down. I could feel Lane's quiet approval beside me. Across the aisle, Emily shifted, then leaned toward her lawyer. They whispered rapidly. The crowd watched, waiting for her reaction. For the first time since this began, she looked at me, not with rage, but confusion, like she was searching for the version of me she'd been fighting to erase. The judge cleared her throat. "Given the evidence presented, the fraudulent signature, the withdrawal pattern, and this transcript admission, the court acknowledges sufficient grounds for restitution proceedings." The sound of the gavel striking once cut through the room. "Verdict to be delivered next week." Lane leaned close again. "You did what you needed to," he said. "Now let the process work." But process was cold comfort. I wasn't sure what justice looked like anymore, only that the truth was finally somewhere it couldn't be deleted or reworded. Reporters gathered near the door as the crowd began to move. Their murmurs blurred into one long hum. I gathered my documents, smoothing each one before sliding it into the folder. Every paper in that stack carried a part of me I'd refused to let her take. As we stepped outside, sunlight spilled through the tall glass windows, too bright after hours of fluorescent glare. Lane adjusted his tie and said, "Next week changes everything." I managed a thin smile. For both of us. A few feet away, Emily waited by the corridor. For a moment, it looked like she might walk over. Instead, she just stared, her expression unreadable. I thought of the first time I'd held her, how small her hand had been against mine. Time erases tenderness faster than it erases pain. The bailiff called for order again, ushering people toward the hall. I turned to leave, the folder clutched tight against my chest. As I reached the doorway, I heard her voice behind me, quiet but sharp enough to cut through the noise. She whispered, "You'll regret this, Mom." Judgment pending, protective order active. The clerk's voice was steady as she handed me the document. The paper still carried the faint scent of toner and something colder, authority. I ran my fingers along the embossed seal, the kind that made the ordinary feel final. Across the top, in careful type, were the words that changed the air around me. Respondent barred from property for 60 days. I didn't cry. I thought I would, but instead, I felt something closer to stillness. It wasn't joy. It was the pause that comes after months of noise. Lane, my lawyer, nodded once. "This means she can't step foot near you," he said. I folded the paper and slid it into the inside pocket of my coat, near my chest. "That's close enough," I said quietly. Outside, the courthouse steps were slick with drizzle. The smell of wet concrete mixed with the ink that still lingered on my hands. For the first time in months, I didn't look over my shoulder walking to the car. Lane walked beside me, his silence respectful. When he finally spoke, it was measured. "You did the right thing filing for protection," he said. "Now you have space to breathe before the verdict." Space. The word sounded foreign. That night, I went home alone. The door clicked shut, and the sound felt new. Final. Secure. I turned the deadbolt twice just to feel it move under my hand. The house seemed bigger without her voice echoing through it, her footsteps pacing past my room. I stood in the living room for a long while, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the quiet creak of old wood. I made tea but didn't drink it. I just held the mug until the warmth faded. For the first time in a long while, I let myself look at her pictures, the graduation photo on the shelf, the family snapshot framed by the window. I didn't hate her. That surprised me. Pity arrived first, heavy and unwelcome. I whispered to the empty room, "What did we become?" The order gave me 60 days. 60 days of legal peace, though peace itself felt fragile. Lane had warned me. People push back harder when they lose control. He was right. By the third day, I started receiving calls from blocked numbers, silent at first. Then, on the fourth call, a man's voice said, "You should drop the charges. Family doesn't do this to family." I hung up. The next one came an hour later, just breathing. I stopped answering after that. Instead of fear, I wrote everything down. Every date, every call, every detail. Proof, as Lane called it. But I also wrote something else. Truths that didn't fit into legal forms. How grief can hide inside anger. How love turns into evidence when someone refuses to see it any other way. At night, I left one light on in the hallway. Not because I was scared, but because I needed to remember what safety looked like in a house that used to hold chaos. I slept with the written notice on my nightstand. Its official seal caught the faint glow and made me feel, just for a moment, protected by more than paper. The following morning, I opened the curtains. The garden looked dull from lack of care, leaves scattered, the soil uneven, but it was mine. I stepped outside barefoot, letting the damp grass press against my feet. The air smelled like earth and ink, an odd blend that somehow made sense. I whispered, "I'm still here." That same afternoon, Lane called to confirm the next step. "Testimony's tomorrow," he said. "Are you ready?" I hesitated before answering. "Not entirely," I said, "but I'll do it anyway." There was a pause. Then he said, "That's what courage looks like." After we hung up, I gathered every document, the court order, the bank slips, the registry proof, and placed them neatly in a folder marked only with my initials. I locked it in the desk drawer and took out my house key, turning it in my hand. The grooves caught the light, a small symbol of everything I'd fought to keep. As evening came, I burned a single candle on the table, its wax dripping in slow, uneven lines. The smell was faintly sweet, nothing like the sterile toner that had marked the start of my freedom. I breathed in deeply, steady. Tomorrow, the verdict would decide our names. In favor of the respondent, full restitution. The judge's words landed like the end of a long winter. I didn't exhale right away. I waited for the sound of the gavel before believing it was real. When it struck, the room shifted. The courtroom light, once so cruel, felt softer now, spilling across the benches and the polished floor like a quiet benediction. "Property restored. Funds totaling $21,300 to be repaid," the judge continued. My name was read with the dignity I had been fighting to reclaim. Across the aisle, Emily sat motionless. She didn't look at me. Her lawyer gathered papers, whispering to her, but she stayed staring ahead, as if distance could erase consequence. The crowd murmured, reporters adjusting recorders, pens scratching against notepads. Somewhere behind me, a woman said softly, "Good for her." I didn't turn. Lane leaned closer, voice low. "It's done," he said. "You've won." I wanted to feel triumphant, but what came instead was quiet relief, the kind that doesn't celebrate. It exhales. The judge's final words still echoed. "Case closed, restitution effective immediately." Lane touched my shoulder before walking to the clerk's desk for the certified copy. I watched the official stamp land on the paper, blue ink sealing months of grief into fact. When I stepped out of the courtroom, sunlight met me at the top of the courthouse steps. It was brighter than it had been in weeks, though still cool against my skin. Reporters waited near the railing, cameras pointed. "Mrs. Reeves, how does it feel?" one asked. I kept walking. Another voice followed. "Do you think justice was served?" I stopped halfway down the steps, said, "Justice doesn't erase what happened. It only names it." That seemed to quiet them. Lane joined me with the folder in hand, the court's seal glinting against the light. "They'll print your story," he said. "People need to hear it." "I didn't do this for headlines," I said. "I did it so I could sleep." He smiled faintly. "Then start tonight." We reached the parking lot. The asphalt shimmered faintly from the heat. I looked back once, the courthouse columns, the flag swaying, the door closing behind her. Emily followed her lawyer down the steps, but didn't speak. For a moment, I thought she might. Then she turned sharply toward the street, her figure swallowed by the waiting car. That was her final answer. At home, the key turned easily in the lock. The house smelled faintly of dust and soap, untouched but familiar. I walked room to room, touching surfaces as if to confirm they were mine again. The chair by the window, the photograph on the mantel, the chipped mug in the sink. Ownership felt less about possession now and more about belonging. I unfolded the court order and placed it on the table. The seal shimmered in a strip of sunlight breaking through the blinds. Lane had said to frame it, but I didn't want to. Paper was just paper. What mattered was what it meant. Recognition that truth, once written off as hysteria, could stand in ink. That evening, neighbors stopped by. Sam brought flowers from his garden, yellow tulips, still damp from watering. "You did it," he said. "You showed them all." I smiled. I just told the truth long enough for someone to listen. Later, when the house grew still again, I sat by the window. Outside, the sky dimmed, but a single line of gold lingered on the horizon. I thought about her, my daughter, somewhere under the same fading light. I wanted to believe she'd find peace too. But peace isn't handed down by judges or signed by clerks. It's earned, and it's costly. My phone buzzed, a notification from the local news. The headline read, "Court case sparks reform talks on elder guardianship abuse." I stared at it for a while, the irony sharp but satisfying. I hadn't meant to become a story. I only wanted my life back. I switched off the phone and leaned back. The house was silent now, but not empty. The light outside flickered once more before settling into dusk. But peace, I learned, isn't silence. Her chair stayed empty all week. I noticed it first at the community center, where we'd once volunteered side by side. It wasn't just the sight of it. It was the way the wooden surface caught the light, a dull sheen where her hand used to rest. Someone had pushed it slightly away from the table, as if unsure whether she'd return. The scrape of wood against tile stayed in my mind long after I sat down. People whispered in soft tones, trying to sound gentle, but not curious. "Such a shame," one said. "Families shouldn't go through that." I pretended not to hear. I unfolded the sign-in sheet and scanned the names. Hers was there, crossed out. Volunteer shifts, 3 canceled, all dated the week before the verdict. A thin red line struck through her name like an accusation, proof of absence, official in its own quiet way. I signed below it and wrote today's date. The pen hesitated for a second before ink touched paper. I'd stopped shaking, at least on the outside. "Good to see you back," one of the coordinators said. She meant well, but kindness can sting when it reminds you of what used to be normal. At lunch, the long table felt emptier than usual. Someone had set out 12 plates, but only 11 were used. The untouched one sat opposite me, silverware neatly aligned. I kept staring at it until Sam leaned over and said, "You don't have to do this, you know. You can take a break." I shook my head. "Routine helps." He nodded, not arguing. He'd seen too much to question what survival looks like in someone else. After the meal, I helped stack chairs. Each one clattered against the next, but that single empty one remained separate. I couldn't bring myself to fold it. The wood felt rough when I brushed my hand across the backrest, like an old scar that never quite smoothed over. I left it there, a silent placeholder for everything unsaid. By midweek, her absence had become gossip. People asked careful questions. "Have you heard from her?" "Is she all right?" I answered with the same phrase each time. "She's finding her way." It wasn't a lie, just a version of mercy. Still, I caught the pity in their eyes, the quiet gratitude that it wasn't their story unraveling in public. During the next meeting, the coordinator asked if I'd like to speak about elder rights awareness. I hesitated, then said yes. When I stood at the front of the room, the faces looking back weren't judgmental anymore. They were open, cautious, human. I told them how control can masquerade as care, how love can turn cruel when mixed with ownership. "Boundaries," I said, "aren't walls. They're doors with locks, and keys should be earned, not taken." The room was still for a moment. Then someone clapped softly, and others followed. I didn't expect applause, but it helped. Afterward, 2 women came up to me. One said, "My son keeps my accounts now. Maybe it's time I check what that really means." The other squeezed my hand without speaking. Empathy, small but sincere, had finally returned. Walking home, I passed the bakery we used to visit. The smell of bread drifted through the doorway, familiar and warm. For a second, I almost stepped inside. Then I remembered how she used to pick the softest rolls and tear them apart before eating. Never whole, always in pieces. I kept walking. That evening, I sat at my own kitchen table, 1 plate, 1 chair. House felt quieter but not lonely. I opened the volunteer ledger, tracing her crossed-out name again. I didn't hate her anymore. I didn't forgive her either. I simply accepted that both things could live in the same heart without tearing it apart. The stakes had changed. I wasn't fighting to prove I was right anymore. I was learning how to live without the need to win. Grief, I realized, wasn't about losing someone. It was about losing the version of them you still wanted to believe in. Just as I was turning off the light, a knock came at the door. I opened it to find a plain envelope on the mat. No stamp, no address. The handwriting across it was instantly familiar. Then a letter arrived in her handwriting. "I didn't know how to stop needing you." That was the first line, written in her careful, looping script. The paper felt cool against my skin, as though the ink hadn't fully dried. I turned the envelope over and read the postmark, sent from a treatment center upstate, dated 2 weeks earlier. For a moment, I just stared at it. I'd imagined every possible ending, but not this. Remorse written in her own hand. I unfolded the letter slowly, afraid it might fall apart if I moved too fast. The edges were smudged with something faintly gray, maybe coffee, maybe tears. The page trembled slightly in my fingers, though I wasn't sure whose shaking it was. "Mom," she wrote, "they say part of recovery is admitting harm. I didn't know how to stop needing control. It made me cruel. I'm sorry." I read it twice before breathing. The air in the kitchen felt colder than usual. Sunlight from the window glinted on the table's surface, sharp and thin. I could still see where she once sat. Across from me, her chair tilted back, her plate always half full. I whispered to the empty room, "You took everything I built." My voice cracked halfway through, then softer, "But you were mine." I sat for a long time, tracing the fold lines in the paper. Every crease carried the weight of years, every word a fragile bridge over what we'd both destroyed. She had written 4 pages, each line more uncertain than the last. No excuses this time, no blame, just plain sentences from someone stripped of defense. "I know you hate me," she wrote. "I don't blame you. I hurt you because I couldn't stand the mirror you held up. I hope one day you'll see I'm trying." For the first time, I didn't feel anger rising. I felt the quiet kind of ache that comes when you realize the storm is over, but the damage remains. The stakes had never been about property or money. They were about recognition. That what happened to me mattered. And now, her letter gave me something the court never could. A glimpse of her humanity beneath the ruin. I picked up a pen, not knowing if I would send a reply. My hand hovered over the page before words formed. "I don't hate you," I wrote. "Neither did I know how to stop needing control until I lost everything." I paused, listening to the silence of the house. It wasn't empty anymore. It was waiting. I signed my name and folded the paper once. No envelope, no address yet. Sam stopped by later that afternoon to drop off groceries. I told him about the letter. He said, "Maybe that's the start of something." I smiled faintly. "Maybe it's just the end written kindly." He nodded, understanding without pressing further. After he left, I walked to the hallway where the photo frames lined the wall. There she was, smiling, 17, wind pushing her hair across her face. I hadn't looked closely at that picture in months. The glass was cold under my fingertips, grounding me. I went back to the kitchen, unfolded her letter again, and read it once more, slower this time. The last line stood out. "I'm learning to live without winning." I whispered, "So am I." That night, I made tea, the same blend she used to like. The cup sat untouched for an hour while I thought about what understanding really meant. Not forgiveness, not forgetting, just no longer needing revenge to feel whole. Before going to bed, I placed her letter under the same plate fragment I'd kept after the first night she left. The broken edge still fit perfectly, like something once whole acknowledging it could never be again, but could still belong. I turned off the light, and the house settled into quiet. Somewhere, I hoped, she was doing the same. I placed the letter under the same plate fragment. I set one plate, slow and steady. The motion felt deliberate, measured in a way it hadn't before. The house was quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet now. Not the silence of fear or accusation or waiting for a door to slam. It was a silence I'd earned. The scent of lavender hung faintly in the air, coming from the candle I'd lit near the window. It wasn't for atmosphere. It was for steadiness, something to mark time passing without tension. 6 months had gone by since the verdict. My days had settled into a pattern that finally felt mine. Morning tea, a walk around the garden, evenings spent at the kitchen table, writing. The table had become a witness of its own, holding everything I'd lived through, the shouting, the paperwork, the letters, the laughter that used to fill the room. Now it held only one plate, one mug, one notebook. I opened my journal, the same one Lane had given me after the hearing. On the newest page, the date stared back, 6 months to the day since the court restored my home. The handwriting underneath looked calmer than it used to. I'd written, "Peace isn't the absence of noise. It's when the noise no longer owns you." I smiled at that line. Maybe I was finally beginning to believe it. I had joined a local support group 2 months ago, a circle of people rebuilding their lives after legal or family losses. We met every Thursday in the basement of the community center, folding chairs, weak coffee, too many biscuits. But the stories felt familiar. Each voice carried some version of betrayal, confusion, or small, steady courage. I spoke for the first time last week, told them about the car keys, the forged papers, the courtrooms, the long nights alone. One woman reached for my hand afterward. She whispered, "You give me hope." That night, when I came home, I unpacked the small wooden box from the top shelf. Inside it was the fragment of the plate I'd kept from the beginning, the one that broke the night she locked the door from the outside. I'd sealed it with glue months ago, but I could still see the crack running through it. I placed it on the table beside the candle. It no longer reminded me of loss. It reminded me of endurance. I wrote another entry in my journal. The lavender candle burns evenly tonight. The small line of smoke curled upward before fading into the ceiling. I watched it, then turned the page and wrote again. I am not lonely. I am alone, and that's different. The house no longer felt haunted by her absence. Sometimes I'd catch myself wondering where she was, if the program had helped her stay clean, if she was writing letters she never sent. But those thoughts no longer hurt. They only reminded me that survival runs in our blood, even if love faltered along the way. Sam still checked on me every now and then. He'd stop by with groceries or updates from the neighborhood. "You've got that glow back," he said last time. I laughed. "It's just the candlelight," he grinned. "Maybe, but you're not hiding behind it anymore." I closed my eyes for a moment, breathing in the faint scent again. Lavender and wax. Simple, ordinary things that used to feel impossible to enjoy. I took the plate from the cupboard, plain white, no pattern, and set it in the center of the table. I poured soup into a bowl, tore off a piece of bread, and sat down. No one watching. No judgment. No rush. As I ate, I remembered her voice, years ago, sharp and impatient. "You eat too slow." I had flinched then, embarrassed, apologizing without words. But tonight, I said it softly, backward, the way healing sometimes works. "You live your pace." The candle flickered once, steadying itself. I picked up my pen again and signed the bottom of the page. Still here. The lavender burned low, leaving a faint trace in the air. I placed the sealed box beside my journal and turned off the light, letting the dark settle naturally. This time, I finish every bite. Did you enjoy this story? Tell me which city you're listening from. I read every comment. If the story touched you, you can support the channel with a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this every day. Your encouragement really helps. I'd love to hear your thoughts and what moment stayed with you. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's plenty more on the channel as well. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. See you in the next life story with respect and gratitude.